Welcome to the American Prepping Academy. My name is JJ Johnson, and we're going to talk about how to build an intelligence network. So we talked a little bit about SHTF intelligence, and this lesson is primarily going to be designed to help you create. The majority of the lesson is going to be focused on helping you create an early warning system, so that you will be informed of things that are happening and developing and going bad, so that you can make choices about how you want to respond to that and maybe potentially fill some gaps in areas that maybe you had shortfalls in your preps and all those kinds of things. So the idea here is that you want to set up a system that's going to feed you information to keep you on alert, to keep you, informed, to keep you in the know about what's going on. But in today's climate, with all the fake news and all that kind of stuff out there, it's getting pretty difficult to do that. It's getting pretty difficult to find at least somewhat reliable information. And I believe that I have outlined a way that will help you do that in this lesson. And so to get started here, we need to define a few things. And the first thing you want to do is you want to define your AOR. AOR stands for Area of Responsibility, or Area of Operations, AO. And that basically comes down to, what I mean by this is, where do you frequent the most often? Like, where do you spend your time? Where do you generally go to and from? When you go from work to your home, or from home to your family and friend's house, what does that area look like? Now, for some people, that might be inside of one county. Maybe their family and friends live in different cities inside of a county, and you kind of regularly go about the kind of the whole county. Other people, you might have, most of your friends and family might be in a city, and so you might rarely ever leave your city. So this is going to be a highly individual thing, but you want to define your area of operations. Where do you frequent the most? And you can go ahead and take a map out or print a map off or whatever the case would be, and kind of outline that. Kind of put all the places that you normally go and take a look at it. You're just using this to understand where you're at. Now, inside of that area that you decide to mark off, then you want to go and you want to do some research, and you want to make a list of all the elected officials, the media personnel, the city and county police, fire departments, hospitals, churches, charitable organizations, utility companies, major industry, all those kinds of things. Anybody who's somebody, that can affect things when it comes to our infrastructure, and when it comes to disasters and disaster responses and those kinds of things, you want to have in that list. Okay, and then you're going to take a look at your area of interest. Now, your area of interest is a larger area. That might be the counties around your county, or a county that you sometimes go into, but not very often. Maybe you've got a relative that lives out there, but you don't see them a whole lot, or something along those lines. So it's just kind of an extended area that kind of matters to you in some way, shape, or form, and that could potentially affect you. And in that, for that area, then you're going to want to make a less detailed list, but you kind of want to do the big ones, like maybe the elected officials, media personnel, county police, those kinds of things. So you don't want to have this list as detailed as the area of operations list. So that's going to take a little bit of work, right? That's going to take a little bit of effort, sitting down with pen and paper, writing these things out, kind of figuring out, okay, who do I want on this list? Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to have a social media accounts, and I recognize that social media is almost worthless. However, there are some benefits to it, and it's completely okay if you want to create an anonymous account or something along those lines. And if you don't want to do this, that's fine. I just think that there is some value in it, and I'll go into that here in a second. if you create the social media accounts on a PC or a computer, and you just log into them every time, then the amount of monitoring that they can do and that kind of thing is significantly less than on a cell phone and doing it through a cell phone app. There's clearly a lot of vulnerabilities in monitoring and things that happen through using your cell phone and cell phone apps. So I'm not necessarily advocating that. I'm just saying that when it comes to being notified of developments and things like that, then social media does have some value. So what you want to do is you want to create those accounts. Facebook and Twitter primarily are the main two, and then you want to follow your local news officials. Local news officials love to get up and be the first to tweet stories out and all that kind of stuff and things that are happening. They want to look like they're in the know. And same thing goes with elected officials. They're the same way. They want to be the first to tell people a lot of things, and so they're usually informed early in a process. You know what I mean? And with the news officials, you're taking advantage of the network that they've created, through their sources that they use for stories and stuff. So you want to follow those folks, and then and you can set that up. You can set your social media accounts up so that you get emailed, whenever those people post and stuff like that. There's different settings that you can use in the social media. So, if you don't want to have it on your phone, but you still want to get notified, they can send you an email to your phone, and then that would still kind of keep you sort of in the know, if that makes sense. Next thing is local law enforcement officials and their social media accounts. You want to follow those. They don't necessarily do a lot of breaking news and stuff, but a lot of places will do like trends and big events and different things like that to kind of let people know what's going on. They'll also do, if they're doing training or different things so that the public knows what's going on and those kind of things as well. Then you want to also follow charitable organizations. So, take a look at your fraternal groups like the Elks Lodge, the Moose Lodge, VFW, local churches, those kinds of things. And you want to follow those accounts. And the reason you want to follow those is because they do a lot of disaster response. So whenever there is a problem, having some notifications from them is going to let you kind of know what people are doing, where food distribution points are, and all those kinds of things. So those could be useful in a disaster situation. County elected officials, their social media pages, county law enforcement officials, and their media pages as well. And then I threw in the FEMA alerts app on your phone. It does a pretty good job of notifying you of different developments as far as severe weather and all those kinds of things. And then for national level alerts or developments, what I use is, and you guys have probably seen this on Patreon, is Alerts USA. And they're a paid prescription service, but they have a whole team of people who are monitoring a very long list of things that they kind of concern themselves with, and they'll send out text alerts as things developed, and then they follow them up with an email. And so I have found, I've used this for about 6 months now almost. Yeah, and I think it's a pretty good service. It's $75 a year if you use the Reality Survival link, and so it's normally a $99 a year prescription. If you're interested in that, then you can check out realitysurvival.com, and then I think there's a page that says Alerts USA, and it's got the link on there. Anyway, so that's kind of what my thoughts are on social media and how it can be used to your benefit. Again, I understand that there are a lot of downsides to it, and for some people, the downsides aren't worth the risk, and that's totally cool. Okay, the next thing is you want to create a system that feeds information to you. And what I have done over the past couple of months is tried to identify a way so that I'm notified of things that are of interest to me. And the 4 primary things that I'm tracking right now are defense and foreign policy, COVID-19, food shortages, and the economy. And it's, like I said earlier, it's very difficult to find stuff that isn't fake news. And so what you have to do is you have to, and it is out there, good information is out there, but you've got to go to specific subject matter experts. And what I mean by this is, let's say for defense and foreign policy, you want to go to people who specify who their interest, their existence is surrounded by reporting on and writing about defense issues or foreign policy issues. Same thing with like COVID-19. You want to go to places where there are experts in virology and immunology and epidemiology and those kinds of things. Same thing with the food shortages. You want to go somewhere, the people who make their living talking about topics that relate to the restaurant industry and the food supply system and those kind of things. And the same thing with the economy. And so over the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you guys some links of places that I have gone to, and I have set up a registered a free account. I haven't paid for any of these services. They're all free. And you register an account, and then you subscribe to their newsletters. And then in their newsletters, they will send those out to your email address, and a kind of a daily wrap up of all the stories that they're putting out on different topics. And then what you can do is just cruise through the titles, find one that looks like it's an interest of you, and then kind of open it up and see if it's if it's worth reading. Just kind of skimming through it real quick. And this is the method that I've used for getting the patrons, the kind of the alerts and stuff that I send out on occasional basis. Just whenever I see something I think that is prepper related or whatever, then I'll kind of send them out. And I feel like it's done a pretty good job of keeping me fairly well informed on what's going on and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will warn you that when you do this, you probably want to use a junk email account or an anonymous account or something like that, because you get a lot of email and you got to sort through a lot of stuff to find something that's of interest to you. And so you end up deleting a lot more than you end up reading, but you can do that pretty quick. My morning routine is that as soon as I wake up in the morning, I check my phone, and usually I've got about 30 to 45 minutes worth of stuff that I can kind of read through and skim through to kind of see what has been going on. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of a routine that I've been doing since this whole COVID thing started. And I feel like I've been ahead of the game in pretty much every instance so far. I haven't been caught by surprise by too many things. So I believe the system is working, at least so far. So, all right, let's take a look at the defense and foreign policy websites that I use. These are just four sites, and the best one is by far and away probably militarytimes.com. And they do a whole daily wrap up of pretty much all the defense related news articles that are out there. And now you have to use a little bit of discernment, because they are kind of an aggregator of information. And so you can get, bad or liberal sources kind of mixed into these. So you do have to use a little bit of discernment on these. But they do, their daily wrap up is, I think they call it the early bird brief, is it's a really good deal. All right, then you've got global security. They're pretty good too. Globalsecurity.org. They're a pretty good one as well. They don't come out with as much information, but they're not too bad. And then FAS.org. They also have a newsletter, and it is also not as frequent, but their website has a bunch of information on it about governments and defense and all that kind of stuff too. So it's a good one to check occasionally. And last but not least, this one is a paid subscription service, and I have signed up for their free newsletter, but I haven't gotten any articles from it recently. So if you were serious about wanting to stay really up to date, you could consider their subscription service. But like I said, I didn't pay for it, and I didn't want to shell out the money for it. But they are a reliable source of good information about what's going on in the defense industry. Okay. So the next topic was COVID-19, Again, we're just looking at a few examples. As situations change and as our situation develops, you could change these topics and go and find other subject matter experts in the topic that you may be interested in. Or maybe you're not interested in defense and foreign policy. Maybe you're interested in something else, and you could search out those subject matter experts for that particular topic. And if you guys need a hand on figuring out who the subject matter experts are or anything like that, then feel free to put a comment down below, and I'll try to do what I can to see if I can help identify some for you. So for the COVID-19, these are the ones that I've primarily been monitoring from the beginning, and it's more information than I can keep up on, for sure. And so nature.com, cell.com, elsevier.com, and all of those three are loosely affiliated with each other, but they do have different information on each site and different studies and those kinds of things. These are essentially medical journal sites where people publish papers on the topics. And the reason that I believe that these are fairly trustworthy is because when you get a group of subject matter experts who are publishing papers, right? That's what these folks do. They publish a lot of papers, and they're peer reviewed. And whenever one expert has a chance to rip another expert on their work, they always do because it makes them look smarter. And so people, generally speaking, they try to publish papers that are accurate because they know that the rest of the community is going to rip them apart if it's not. So while you do see some flawed studies and stuff like that come out, generally speaking, they try to do a good job as much as they can to follow the scientific method and those kinds of things. Now, if you start looking at social justice papers and that kind of thing, that's a different realm than medical science, and those kind of things. The reliability in the medical sciences community is a lot higher than in your social justice warrior kind of nonsense. So then the last three are Lancet.com, and then the journal, the JAMA Network, which is the Journal of American Medical Association, and then the New England Journal of Medicine, the NEJM.org. And all of these are really good places to find a lot of good information on COVID-19 and pretty much any other medical issue that you want to look at. And again, they'll send you emails with the most recent articles and stuff, and you can just kind of peruse through it and be like, oh, that's interesting, let me read that. And then a lot of times what I do is I'll just read the summary, because the summary usually gives a pretty good idea of what it's talking about, just good enough for the layman. And then that way you don't have to really dig into the whole paper. But you can if you want to. Okay, so I didn't... let me fix this real quick. Food shortage. So for food shortages, what I have been monitoring is foodbusinessnews.net, and that's probably the best one of these. And then I also subscribe to the USDA's their email list, the United States Department of Agriculture, and then food-management.com and verdictfoodservice.com. And so all of these, they'll send you out emails with different articles and all that kind of stuff. And these are folks that are in the food business. They monitor supply and the changes in the community and all that kind of stuff on a pretty regular basis. And so you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. And the Department of Agriculture surprisingly sends out a ton of information on the subject that I had no idea prior to signing up for this that they ever even got involved in. Okay, so with the economy, I am not a economist, and a lot of the articles in some of these things are really in depth, really kind of heady topics, you know what I mean? And so really just above my level, to be quite honest with you. But what I found is that in some of the journals that I was looking at early on were just too complicated for me to really understand. So I found these, which is marketwatch.com, investors.com, kiplinger.com. And those three are pretty good, and the articles that they send out are not too deep in the weeds. They're enough to keep you up to date on what's going on, but they don't get really too deep in the weeds. And then you've got finance.yahoo.com and Reuters.com /finance. And these two are kind of, they're almost like aggregators of information. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful on those and on the reliability of them. But it gives you some additional headlines to flow through to kind of verify and bounce off, the other articles that you're seeing to kind of see that they're accurate, if that makes sense. So that is, those are the 4 that I have watched, that I get on my email that flood my inbox every day, and then I go through and I kind of check those out. So it's the best simulation that a civilian can do that I have figured out that would kind of simulate an intelligence analyst having information fed to them. So that's kind of what I'm trying to create, if you will. But there is no substitute for human sources of information. And I think that this one, this topic is really, really important, and it's the hardest to develop. It is, without a doubt, the hardest to develop, and it's the one that you have to spend the most time at, and you have to put the most energy into. All the stuff that we've talked about so far, you could do, if you sat down, really put your mind to it, you could probably have it all done within, an hour or two. Not a big deal. Developing human sources of information is a lot trickier, and this is something that has kind of been my bailiwick within the military for a long time. And so I'm going to try to talk with you guys about a few ways to do this in a civilian setting. I'm kind of transferring some of the information from my military career into here that makes sense to me on how you can monitor things that are of interest to you. So that kind of flows right into, you want to identify the people who are in positions of interest by expertise. And so maybe that's hospital workers if you were talking about the COVID-19 situation. Or maybe it's restaurant owners if you're talking about food shortages and those kind of things. If you're worried about the housing market, it could be a realtor or a mortgage lender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically, you have to cultivate these relationships. You have to identify, through talking with your friends and family, hey, do you know anybody who is, restaurant owners? Do you know anybody who's a mortgage lender or those kind of things? I'd love to meet them sometime and talk with them, about this kind of situation or whatever the case may be. And then you establish that relationship with them. It's a friendship is really all it is. It's nothing more than a friendship. And then, you take a calendar off your phone or your day planner, and you try to maintain that relationship once a month or so. Shoot them a text. Hey, had a great time at dinner. Love to have you guys out, some other time. Those kind of things. The thing is that the important thing to remember through developing human sources is that it's not a one-time situation. You don't just go out and have dinner and ask them questions. That's not how it works. You have to develop that friendship over time. You've got to develop their trust. You've got to, get them to see you as somebody who's important in their life. And so it takes a fair bit of manipulation, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. But really, you can develop honest and genuine friendships, but that's what it takes. That's just the bottom line. Is that's what it takes, and so it's a lot of work. The next thing is people. You want to identify people who are geographically co-located, close to your area, like neighbors. People who live in proximities to local threats. So let's say there's a chemical plant near you, or a nuclear power plant, or a prison, or something along those lines. Developing friendships with people who are around those areas may be able to help provide you like an early warning kind of system if something goes bad at those places. And again, nothing different about how you go about that, creating that relationship and maintaining that relationship. It's just that you're not necessarily looking at them for their expertise. It's more based off of where they live. Okay. Okay, so the next thing is people in critical fields. So police, dispatchers. Dispatchers are great sources of information because they don't necessarily have their guard up as much as some police officers do, and they're a lot more friendly, and they know everything, literally, like they know everything that's going on inside of a precinct. City officials and secretaries in those offices, like if say the tax assessor or somebody who works in the tax assessor's office, and maybe they're not the actual assessor, but maybe they just work in the office and work behind a desk in there. Great spot. They're great people to to identify as well, because they can tell you what's going on in government. They can tell you what's going on with the county and all those kinds of things. Same thing with first responders there. So then you also want to look at identifying people who are like-minded. Now, these might be other preppers, and maybe they're only like-minded in certain aspects. Maybe they're not full-blown preppers, but maybe they are somewhat self-reliant or a little bit more conservative or whatever the case may be. But they have their feelers out too. If you know that there's somebody who networks, that is a very outgoing person that has a lot of relationships with people, salespeople kind of come to mind, people that hear a lot of information, then those are the kind of people that you also want to befriend and add into your network, and then maintain that network. Even if these people aren't part of your prepper circle, they're still really useful to have because, again, they've got their ear to the ground, they're listening to what's going on, and they can they can provide good information. Now, the last group of people is people who have skill sets that you lack in. So, for example, it might be like a ham radio guy, or maybe somebody who's really good at gardening. Really good at tactics or first aid or whatever the case may be, because these people can then provide you with information about how to develop your own skills. So it's always better to be friends with somebody who's smarter than you, right? So that's kind of just the quick down and dirty on human sources of information. Like I said, it's really all about developing friends who are in the right place and then maintaining that relationship over time. The difference is normal people develop a friend just because, oh, I just met this person. You're just intentionally going about doing that and then, trying to develop that friendship from there. Okay, so the next one is, we're just going to brush on these last two pretty quickly. We've already been going for a while. Signals intelligence. So this is information that you can get from the airwaves, basically. And again, it's this is oriented towards civilians, and so the police scanners are good sources, both digital and analog. A lot of the digital trunking scanners are difficult to pick up and get channels on unless you've got a fairly expensive scanner. And some of them just may be encrypted to the point where you can't get anything. But usually they'll have an admin channel and then an encrypted channel, and you can usually listen in on the admin channel, and you can still glean a lot of information from that. And then you've got the specific area. What is it? Dang it. Specific area message encoding weather alerts. And so if you get a weather radio, then that's programmed with these same alerts, then it'll tell you weather alerts about what's going on in your area. And that's a good thing to have. I have one right on my nightstand, and that way if there's any developing weather or tornadoes or whatever the case may be, it lets me know. And then you've got you can scan ham frequencies. We talked a little bit about some of those frequencies in the Radio Communication 101 lesson. But I would get with your local ham club and find out what the active channels are in your area, and you can scan and just listen to any of the stuff that comes across on that. That's mostly going to be more oriented towards when there's a situation developing. You may not get a lot of information on that on a daily basis, but if something's happening, then those guys usually tend to get on there and be a little bit more chatty. And then you can also use the shortwave radio for international news and international news developments and those kinds of things. Okay, so for image intelligence, it's pretty limited unless you got your own satellites. And but luckily, Google Earth and Google Maps does have fairly good satellite imagery capability, and you can use that for studying your terrain, studying your area, seeing what's around you, and all those kinds of things. But you do need to understand, you do need to realize this is not real-time imagery, and many times they can be up to a few years old. They've gotten pretty good about keeping it up to date, but there are some places where it's up to 4 or 5 years old. Okay, the next one is personal drones. Again, this wouldn't be something that you would use in just a daily basis, but if there was a situation happening, having a drone and being able to send it up to look out and see what's going on might be an asset. And one thing that pops to my mind is like forest fire situation. Being able to put a drone up and see just how far a forest fire is, what direction it's heading, how fast it's moving, and all that kind of stuff could be pretty useful if you live in an area that would require that, or that could be beneficial from that. And then the last thing, on image intelligence is binoculars, cameras with long lenses, those kind of things, being, scopes on rifles and those kind of things. Again, that's just getting information real time from a far distance looking through a lens. So that is pretty much that. That's the lesson for this week, and it's something that is kind of specific to you and what you want to know. But I think it hopefully will provide you just a framework of what you can do to start getting information flowing to you that is fairly reliable and, for the most part, trustworthy. Trying to rely on the mainstream media, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, and all that kind of stuff. They are so tilted and unreliable that I just don't even think it's really worth watching anymore. It really isn't. And so going to the subject matter experts in the area of interest that you're looking for is probably going to be the best thing for you to do on a daily basis. And it really has seemed to work out quite well for me since I started doing this. So anyway, guys, if you got any questions, stick them in the comments down below, or shoot me an email at americanpreppingacademy@protonmail.com, and I'll do the best I can to answer them for you. Thanks, and we'll see you on another video here shortly.